Hey, how's it going guys? It's your boy Meteor Kaiser back again with another challenge video. You know how we did the whole Path of Radiance thing? Yeah, we're going to be doing Radiant Dawn now. Now, unlike our Path of Radiance where it was just Ike, this is going to be a little bit different where we're going to be using every character. The sort of owner limits I'm giving myself in this run is I am not allowed to use bonus experience, or I'm not allowed to equip skills. Okay, so let's just go over the first thing real quick. So bonus experience is experience that you get for completing the map that you can spread throughout your party members, and that'll basically level them up, which is pretty useful, especially for a game like Radiant Dawn where you have a lot of party members, like a lot of characters join your team, and it's a game that is split between 4 parts. The other thing, of course, is the skills. I just thought it would be a little bit harder if I left skills out of it. Now, I'm not taking off any character's skills. So, like, for example, Ike is going to be stuck with Aether, you know, that type of thing, because it's already on his character when he's promoted. And characters that have, like, Canto that can move after they attack, things like that, that's staying on the character. I'm not removing any skills, I'm just not putting any new ones on. So no Paragon, none of that stuff. No, I think Paragon's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But anyway, you get the idea, right? The other thing is this will be a multi-part series like most of my stuff. The reason I'm doing this one in a multi-part was I actually planned on doing this all in one part. And then I realized, oh, I've recorded about 50 hours of footage. So I was like, nope, no way I'm doing it in one part. So I'm going to be doing part 1 and part 2 in this episode. And in the next 2, it'll be part 3 and then part 4. Part 1 encompasses the Dawn Brigade, which is essentially a group of rebels who are trying to take back Dane after it has been taken over by Bangyang, however the fuck you pronounce that country's name. And then part 2 has to do with the Crimean Royal Guards and the Queen of Crimea, Queen Valencia. So that about sums up the beginning. And if you haven't done so already, hit that sub button, that'd be greatly appreciated. Let's just go ahead and jump into the very first chapter. Now, unlike most Fire Emblem games before this, we open up with a little cutscene and a very famous, is it the Dawn Brigade? No, it's just a bird. We love that shit. So it starts you off with your main character for this part, Micaiah, who is the Sage of Light, or the Priestess of Light, whatever she wants to go by, and she's the leader of the Dawn Brigade. So, like most games, you have a Jagan character, and this game's Jagan character is Soth, who was actually in Path of Radiance. He was that little boy that you could have used. Not very good in that game. This game, really good. Well, for part 1 at least. Part 1, he's your Jagan, and he is really good. After part 1, he starts to dip off though, so just a heads up. But to be honest, most of the Dawn Brigade members completely fucking suck. You also have access to Edward and Leonardo in this chapter. They're not really anything to write home about. So in this chapter, it's your standard opening chapter, just attack the bandits, and you have 3 units to do so. I'm trying to give as much experience to Micaiah as I can, but I end up using my boy Edward to finish off Pugo, the first boss. After we complete part 1 Prologue, Under Grey Skies, we move on to chapter 1, Maiden of Miracles. And that's how I'm going to be going through this. I'm going to be calling it 1-1. So part 1, chapter 1. In between the chapters, we'll have a little bit more backstory, which is nice. In 1-1, we have access to Nolan, who is an axe fighter, who is one of the more useful members of the Dawn Brigade. Useful enough that you'll probably end up promoting him by the end of the sort of first chapter of the game, or the first part of the game. So I would recommend using Nolan as much as you can. Leonardo and Edward are going to fall off very quickly, so I wouldn't worry about them too much. Anyway, this chapter isn't too bad. Just go through it very carefully. If you need to use Sacrifice, which is Micaiah's sort of gimmick, where she can basically give her HP to another characters. So she literally sacrifices her HP to heal, because we don't have a healer quite yet at this point, but we'll be getting one soon enough. Anyway, Nolan can pretty much tank these guys pretty easily, so just go through the chapter with him, and then you'll be able to reach Isaiah pretty easily and defeat him. We move on to chapter 1-2, The Dispossessed. This chapter is a little bit more, I don't know if I'd say annoying or hard, but it was the first one I got a game over on. Now, the 2 characters you get introduced to in this chapter are Laura, who is going to be a healer for the game, and then the other one is Soth, who actually will join up on this chapter. Soth is also a thief, so it's useful for him to pick the treasure chests. which is very nice, and it'll be especially nice in this chapter, as there is a Thani in a chest, which is a super powerful light tome. Definitely recommend giving that to Micaiah. Wind Edge, which is pretty useful, can give it to Edward. It's a ranged sword. And then an energy dropped, which is another great item for extra strength, which I would probably recommend giving to Nolan at this point. But anyway, it introduces the concept of ledges. Ledges are super good if you are on top of it, super bad if you're on the bottom, because it'll basically increase/decrease accuracy for attacks, depending on where you are. If you're on top of the ledge, super easy to just frame fire down below. However, if the reverse is true, then you're going to want to put a good unit up against the ledge, or just avoid the ledges altogether. Took me a few tries to basically get Laura in a position where she wasn't getting hit each turn, and plus Leonardo and Edward suck. So you're basically going to be running through this chapter with Nolan, hopefully trying to get a bit of experience with Micaiah, and Soth trying to clear out everything else possible. We grab all the treasure chests, take out the boss Zaitan, and move on to chapter 1-3, A Fate Light. Okay, in this chapter we have a few more units. We have Ileana, who is from the first game. She's that Thunder Mage, so kind of useful to have another range person for now. We also get Aaron, who is an enemy soldier who you can recruit if you talk to him with Laura. He'll pop up around halfway through the chapter from the left side of the map. I didn't even notice at first. You're just looking for someone that has a slightly different sprite. He is a soldier. This chapter gave me some problems with all of the units that are spread out. Now basically my best advice is to just bum rush the bottom with Soth and Nolan, and have the rest of your weaker units pick off the guys that aren't as strong, and you can sort of hide behind. Basically, use Soth as much as humanly possible, long story short. After enough time and patience and me dying once, I make my way to Burton, defeat him, and move on to the next chapter, chapter 1-4, Distant Voice. Okay, now, Distant Voice is another sort of annoying chapter. This is the first introduction of Laguz in this game. I sort of went over what Laguz are in my Path of Radiance, and I'm not really going to go over the story too much in this run through. So if you want to figure out what Laguz are, you can either check that out or Google as a thing, I guess. But yeah, this is more of just a little run through, not so much a story based thing. So this chapter, we get access to Meg, who, Meg is like the worst character in this game. And this is one of the few games that I'm going to go through and actually not give a shit about every character. Because normally I'll like, if any character dies, I'll reset. However, in this chapter, Meg dies, and I'm like, I don't care. Meg is like the worst unit in this game. She's a tank with no defense. Like, what use is that? Like, absolutely useless. So this chapter has Pain and Agony as bosses, who kind of remind me of those, God, I can't remember the two guys, but you know, the two guys from FE7 who are in the desert. I can't remember their names. It's that desert chapter. You know, that really annoying one? Why can't I remember the names? Anyway, that's not important. Basically, yeah, there's two Laguz bosses, so you're going to want to deal with both of them. However, I would definitely recommend dealing with the one on the right first, so you can go around scooping up all the treasure chests with Soth, because you want to use Soth to kill things, but you also want to use him to get the treasure chests. Now, the only problem about Soth as a Jagan is he is a little bit more flimsy. He's strong but flimsy. So just be careful, make sure his health is enough, and give him vulneraries if he needs to. Right, remember vulneraries in this game do 20 HP, not 10, which is great. Some of the chests, starting from the bottom left going up, is a pure water, 3k gold, a seraph robe, which is great in the upper right. Definitely recommend giving that to Micaiah, and a chest key, which is an enemy drop. So in case you don't have stealth around, you can use the chest key. Anyway, we defeat both Pain and Agony. We move our way to chapter 1-5, The Lost Heir. Now, I would say this is probably the last of the easier chapters, because after this it gets a little bit hectic. This chapter's still a little bad though. So in this chapter we get one new character. We get Volug, who is a Laguz, he's a wolf Laguz who can basically half shift, so that means he's not that powerful, but he stays shifted all the time, so he'll never come out of Laguz form. I definitely recommend using Volug. The only problem is he doesn't get, he gets 1 point of experience per killing something, so it's probably not a good idea to kill with him too much. I definitely recommend staying a bit more on a defensive with him. Use him only if you need to. Now, there you have a couple of characters that you'll be reuniting with from Path of Radiance. You have Jill, Zehark, and Tornado. Now you won't be able to use them this chapter, but they are green units. Talk with South if you'd like to, but I don't necessarily think it's a necessity. The best way to sort of go about killing this chapter is you don't even have to, it's a defense chapter, so you have to defend for 6 turns. So defeating the boss Whiston is kind of going to be kind of difficult because you don't really want to have South just bum rush with all of those mages around. I'd honestly just stick some of your range units on the ledge and poke down at the units from above. It's probably the best option, to be honest. So throughout the game, there's going to be hidden treasures. So you just literally step on a tile and then there'll be something on them. So like concoctions, and there's a concoction on this one and a coin. Coins are actually useful in this game, so I'd recommend getting them. However, I don't end up getting everything because I don't need everything. There's an enemy soldier that has a master seal if you want to get that. And the easy mode, the chapter doesn't end as early, so it's easier on easy, but like if you're playing normal or hard like I am, it's going to be a little bit worse. So one thing I didn't mention is the weird way that the difficulty system works in this game. The difficulty is basically, so in America, easy is is normal in Japanese. Normal is hard in Japanese. And then a hard is maniac in Japanese. So I'm playing this game on normal and it's still giving me a rough ass time, which is kind of shocking, but still, it's just one of those things that I have to live with. But anyway, when we clear the chapter, we are reunited with Peleus, who's basically, he's the son of Ashnard from the last game. And that's the whole thing. We're basically going to become like Ashnard's, or sorry, Peleus's like general, aka Micaiah is. So that's sort of the gist of the story. Very, very basic. There we go. Anyway, next we move on to chapter 1-6, Raise the Standard. I said the last chapter is the last of the easy ones, but this one's not terrible either. On this chapter, you get access to Zehark, Tornado, and Jill automatically. And Zehark, Tornado, and Jill are going to be very useful in this chapter. Jill is a wyvern rider, so very useful for traversing terrain, especially with all this grass in the middle of the map. I try and use her and get as much experience as I can with her, but to be honest, she is a little flimsy. She's a very good character if you let her grow. However, just be careful because she is a bit flimsy. Zehark starts out as a pre-promoted swordmaster, and Tornado starts as a pre-promoted general. 2 very powerful units that you can use to help you get your way through these early chapters. Don't use them too much if you don't want to waste too much experience, but to be honest, most of the time I'm just going to use Stealth for everything. We actually move on to part 2 of the same stage, which is weird that it's in two sort of bits, but on this one, this stage isn't too bad, right? It's very wide open, and you're going to have some allies in the form of Fiona and her men. They're sort of sick of the general's rule and think that he's doing bad shit. So they basically flee, and we're trying to save their units as much as we can. So basically, there's 2 paths that you can take. I put South, Tornado, Aaron, Ileana, and Edward over on the right side, and everyone else on the left. Basically, Nolan doing the most work, Nolan and Zehark doing the most work, and then Volug and Jill hit and running. I basically wait for all of the enemy units to sort of get to me, and then I make my way over to the boss. And we're done with that chapter. We move on to what is, I consider, probably the worst chapter so far. Oh man, I had a lot of problems with the Gathering Hope. I had to put the game down for a few days. Okay, so a Gathering Hope is, in this chapter you get Fiona joining you, and you get Tormod, Murim, and Vika. Tormod and Murim from the last game, and then Vika, who is a Raven Lagoos that joins them. So the biggest problem with this chapter are there are a lot of powerful units. There's enemy knights that will just one-shot you if you're not careful. Even giving Jill a hammer still sort of hurt. And of course, to deal with them, you want to use your mages, right? But our mages aren't that good. The best mage that we have right now is when Tormod comes over. Also, Murim is very useful. However, don't abuse him too much, again, as he is a Lagoos that isn't getting much experience. The best advice I can give for this chapter is to just take this shit slowly, abuse ledges, and don't get caught off guard by reinforcements like I did. I had Laura in a bad position and she got sniped, and I had to reset the entire chapter because I'm not losing my healer, even if Laura is kind of shit. But anyway, we barely make our way to the boss Jir, and defeat him and move on to Glory Unwanted, another pain in the ass chapter. Glory Unwanted is chapter 1-8, and it is a swamp chapter, I guess you could consider it. Very, very weird chapter because, so basically there are 3 areas which you have people. Bottom is where you have Tormod, Vika, and Meruem. Middle is where you have everyone else. And then on the left side, you'll have Nyla and Raphael. Raphael is a bird lagoose, a heron, who is basically one of the 3 dancers of the game. They're an almost extinct group of lagoos, and that was sort of more went over in Path of Radiance. And then on the right side, and then with Raphael is Nyla, who is the Queen of the Wolves. Now she is a royal lagoose, which means 1, she is super fucking powerful, very good unit. 2, that also means that she will not lose her lagoose form because she is a royal. And 3, she's super fucking powerful. I think I said powerful enough. Anyway, the gimmick of this chapter is there's going to be enemies in the middle who are basically, their goal is to defeat and kill prisoners that are stuck in the swamp. Our goal is to save them. So my best advice is to take Vika, immediately use either an olivine grass or a lagoose stone on her, get her to send out in the middle so she can protect against the Wyvern Knights. Then use Volug and Nyla, who are on the left side, to deal with all of those reinforcements. Start bringing them over, and then slowly with your main group, make your way to the boss Radmin and defeat the enemies over there and beat the boss. And you move. It's a pain in the ass chapter. You have to be very careful because there's a lot of enemies with venom axes and venom weapons which will poison you. So use vulneraries if you need to, and you should be able to make your way up into the next chapter, One Survives. Alright, now One Survives is 1-9, which is actually a more difficult chapter than it should have been for me. In this chapter, there's literally only one unit that you can pick, which is Micaiah, and she'll basically get attacked in the middle of the night by a bunch of Benyon forces, along with the general, Jared. Jared's basically trying to make a last stand and kill Micaiah, and our boy from the first game, the Black Knight, decides to come to our rescue. Now, my thing was I'm just going to try and get along the chapter without using the Black Knight at all. Because using the Black Knight, he's a max level, he's super powerful, but he won't get any experience. And I want to try and give Micaiah as much experience as I possibly can to make her a little stronger. Stupid idea. I should have just started killing shit from the get-go. Anyway, if you're not stupid, you should be able to beat Jared pretty easily. And we move on to chapter 1E, or 110, I guess. But it's 1E because it's 1 Endgame. So it's the final chapter in part 1, in which you're taking down Jared once and for all. Now this chapter, again, very, very difficult. Honestly, super difficult. There's basically a staircase and then a system of ledges that you can put your units on. Now I think it's a good idea to have South go in the middle. I also put Tormod in the middle and Nolan. And then I basically brought everyone else to the left side that sort of needed a little bit more defense, because I was okay with leaving South to attack things. Also, we do have the Black Knight in this chapter, so technically it could have been easy if I just used the Black Knight, but I actually left the Black Knight at the beginning of the map to deal with enemy reinforcements. I thought it was just easier that way. Starting turn 2, there's a couple of thieves that show up, so you want to basically catch up with them and kill them, because you don't want them getting the items in the chests. The chests are a Reaper card, which is alright, a Speed Wing, great for speed, Unlock Staff, Vantage, which is a skill, but it doesn't really matter, a coin, and Parity skill. Again, it doesn't really matter for skills for me, but again, I just would rather have everything, because at least that way I can sell the items if I need to. So I played this chapter very cautiously, super cautiously. I tried to clear out every enemy before I even attempted to seize over Jared, and I made sure everyone was nice and healed before I even attempted to kill him. I ended up using Nyla a lot more than I should have, but it's alright. Nyla's a good unit, and I don't care that I have to use a royal. And that is the end game of part 1. We have taken out the Benyon forces in Dane and released Dane from its control. We're able to move on to part 2, which focuses on Queen Alencia and her Crimean Knights. Part 2 is a lot shorter than part 1, which is useful. There's only about 4 or 5 chapters. However, they are all pretty scary. Pretty much every single character in this part is on their second promotion. Or not second promotion, but you know, they're stage 2, right? They're advanced classes. In part 1, everyone was base class. This one, they're all advanced. There's also a third one in this game. You can advance your unit to the 3rd level. You can either do that with an item, or you raise them to level 21 in the US release, not in the Japanese though. Anyway, now we start with our first chapter in part 2, chapter 2 Prologue on Drifting Clouds. This is a sky chapter in which you have a few units. You have Alencia, Marcia, Leanne, and Nialuchi, who is the Prime Minister of Nacella from the first game, the Raven King. Alencia is a very powerful unit. She is a tier 3 unit from default. She is a queen, super powerful, good healing. She has a weapon that does not lose durability. On the other hand, Marcia is not very good, and Nialuchi is okay. There is one other character that we get about halfway through. He'll show up in the map. It is Har, and you're gonna have to get used to seeing Har because I use Har like way too much. Har is easily, I think, the best character, if not one of the best characters in the game. Super strong, good base stats, very good unit. Anyway, I end up using him to kill the boss Zephyrin and move on to chapter 2-1 Winds of Rebellion. Now in this chapter we only have a couple of units. We have our lord for the chapter, which is Nephany and Brom from the first game, who you get access to at the beginning, and then Heather, who is a thief that'll join you about halfway through. Nephany is by far my favorite Tellius character. I don't know why I like Nephany so much, but I do. It's just one of those characters that I love. So I will spend this entire game trying to make her strong. She is a decent unit, but she is not, I wouldn't say she's endgame material, and we'll figure that out as we go through. She starts off as a level 1 halberdier, which is a pretty good unit, and then Brom starts out as an axe general. So they're both tier 2. They're both pretty decent. Brom is honestly better in this chapter because there's a lot of enemies that are just strong, and then the mages will actually, it's kind of weird, there's mages in this, but they will not counterattack unless you get like right next to them. So if you stay right outside of their range, they will not attack you, which is beautiful. And Heather is strong enough to sort of survive on her own until you reach across to her, even though she's really not that good of a unit. Anyway, we were able to clear out this chapter over a slight amount of time, with Yeardley being the boss. We sort of tiptoe around him, and it's kind of a hard chapter, I won't lie. For a chapter with only a couple of characters, it's pretty hard. Anyway, we're able to move to 2-2, which the lord of this chapter, I guess, is... This whole thing is weird. So you start off with Alencia, now it's Nephany, and now the lord of this chapter is Lucia, who's Alencia's aide. Lucia is a sword master, and she's pretty decent. You also have access to a few more units. You have Mordecai and Leth, who are 2 Lagoos. Mordecai is pretty good in this chapter. Leth is okay. She's a unit. Advice for this one, I would send Brom in before anything because this is a dark chapter. Nialuchi is pretty good as well, as he has a lot of HP. The only problem is there's a couple of guys that use bow guns, so avoid them with Nialuchi. Not too bad of a chapter. We make the way to the end to Mirage, defeat him, and move on to chapter 2-3, Jeffrey's Charge. Now the main unit in this one is our boy Jeffrey, if the name of the chapter didn't really say anything, you know? I thought it was pretty obvious. This is a very weird chapter because there's like 4 or 5 of you guys and a shit ton of green units. It's basically a war. Your units are Jeffrey, who is a very good lance paladin, Kieran, who is a great axe paladin. Those are like the only 2 good units though. I mean, Danved's alright, but Makalov and Astrid, the 2 brothers and the brother and sister. Makalov is an alright sword user, but he's really not that good. And then Astrid is possibly one of the worst units in the game. Really bad archer. The only thing she's got going for her is she's got Kanto because she's on horse. Danved is a relatively strong character, but not the best, to be honest. Your main characters that you're going to use for this chapter are going to be Jeffrey and Kieran. And honestly, I wouldn't recommend raising any of the others unless you really want to. You also have Marcia, but Marcia is not exactly the most helpful character either. I love Pegasus Knights, but in this game, they're not very good. Even Tanith and Sigrun later are not that great. Anyway, so this chapter is just more long than it is hard. There's just a lot of units that you got to get through. But as long as you're cautious, you take your time, you heal up, you should be able to make your way to the boss Tashoria pretty easily. Just be careful of the ballistas and just take things slow. Use the healing grass if you need to. I will admit I almost died a couple of times. Makalov almost completely fucking got destroyed. Same with Danved, who is actually, it's weird, he's Danved in this game, but he's Devdan in the last game. I don't know why they changed his name, but whatever. Anyway, we are able to move our way onto the last chapter of this part, which is pretty nice, which is a very short part. We move on to chapter 2E, or chapter 2-4, I guess it would be, of this, which is Alencia's Gambit. This is a defense chapter in which you basically have to defend your throne area, place thing, for 15 turns. It is a long ass chapter, but in this chapter you have access to Alencia and Har, along with the rest of your party from before. So basically the only characters that are not here are Lucia. That's it. She's the only one that you're not going to be using. So you start off with all of your regular guys, and then Jeffrey's group joins halfway through from the right side of the map. Now you have two options. You can either go after the boss Ludwig, or you can just chill, wait for them to come to you. The one thing I would recommend is leaving Har on that staircase on the left side of the map, because nothing can get by him if that's the case. The generals that show up on the right side, I just recommend poking away with like Khalil, who joins you, who's a mage, Nephany, whoever you've got. Poke with Nyluchi if you need to. Make sure you're using Leanne to make units move twice. Mordecai's pretty good here as well. I wouldn't use Heather too much if I were you. And I just kept Alencia out of death range. So you just got to work for 15 turns. And again, if you want to do what I did, go ahead. You can go for Ludwig, but you don't necessarily have to. The enemies do drop some stuff, which is pretty nice. There's an energy drop, a silver great lance, a nullify spell, and a tomahawk, which the tomahawk is really nice. You can also steal things like coins and a Reaper card and a Draco shield. So if you guys want to just go for it with Heather, by all means try, but I don't think it's worth it, to be honest. Also, make sure that you're using the ledge advantage to your gain. There's going to be some archers sitting out the bottom of the ledge. Just hit them while you can. They're not going to hit you back. You're fine. Anyway, guys, so that's going to do it, because I don't want to step into part 3, which is Ike's part, quite yet. So we'll do that in the next part. So overall, these two parts, not too bad. I had some difficulty with the end of chapter 1, quite a lot. It wasn't too bad. It was a few resets and it was fine. It was like a couple of hours per chapter. Not bad. And then part 2 was pretty easy, to be honest. This chapter was a little annoying, but it was just more time consuming. The last 2 chapters were. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name has been Meteor Kaiser. Peace.